Let's take a look at the 10 parts of the new leadership paradigm. These are just small statements, essence statements that you can come back to later and that I will go into greater detail as we're going along. First is ability and how to unlock ability. Ability, I think the general statement you want to make is our capacity to accomplish things, and the major question is how do we unlock it and keep it tapped? Number two in the paradigm is establishing the standards. Standards are a reflection of our values, and it's the standards that serve as the guidepost and channel markers on our way to achievement. You find in the absence of standards, you usually see the absence of achievement. The third one is manage. Manage is the ability to facilitate cooperation among people that are seeking to achieve constructive goals. And what we're going to do is to examine the manager as a facilitator, a new idea. Number four is a creative climate. Creative climate is an atmosphere for achievement. And how do we maintain a creative climate? Number five is the concept of self-motivation. People are moved to act at their need level. How do we understand this self-motivation? Number six is the concept of mastery. How do we become a master at what we do? What are the characteristics of a master? Number seven are long-term constructive goals, which are the desired end results. How do we achieve them with the highest productivity? Number eight is a participatory environment. The participatory environment is where the environment itself causes people to act and to participate and to get involved. We'll look a little bit how to design a participatory environment. Number nine, the concept of mutual respect. How to engender mutual respect, which really is the glue that makes things stick together. And last, number 10, we'll talk about values. Values are those things that we hold to be important to determine our action. And the question is how to manage by values for greater achievement and how to focus, as Mike Markkula said on them, for both use within the business and use within one's personal life. As we go along, sometimes I get enthusiastic, when I'm talking, but and I want you to know that my enthusiasm doesn't in any way mean I think I have all the answers, because I don't think that. When you talk all the time, talk all day like I do, I sometimes disagree with myself. I'll hear a thought, a new concept, a new idea. So please understand my spirit. The other thing is I don't believe in magic formulas either. If you try these two or three things tonight, tomorrow you'll be different. I've tried most of those. They don't work. I think life is a process. You either do it from beginning to end or you don't do it. I think the people that intimate that you can put it into a formula do us all a really great disservice. I also don't present things as strict dogma. Dogma meaning living with the conclusion of other people's thinking. I think it's important what you think. I think what I'm saying is important for you to examine yourself and to make your own conclusions. Let's take a little look at number one, ability, our capacity to accomplish, our capacity to achieve, to get things done, to be successful and not mess stuff up. There's been, I suppose, a debate since the beginning of time is how much heredity plays, how much genetics play, and of course there's no question they both play a lot, and nobody really knows. It's too subjective. I don't suppose we'll ever have an accurate measure, but one thing we do know for sure about heredity and both heredity and environment, that we see people that are given very poor environments, sometimes rising up and doing extraordinary things. We also see people coming out of very poor environments that have an awful lot of problems. And yet, then we see people that are what we call the negative case, that have bad beginnings in every way, genetically. They don't have good health and so forth, and they still seem to rise up and have a lot of fulfillment in their life. I'm not dismissing that, but I'll tell you what I think more than anything else affects ability and our capacity to accomplish that we're coming to understand so clearly as we look out and think about how do we lead and work with people, and that is non-thinking. Probably more than any single thing. I really believe that non-thinking is what causes us not to be able to do things more than anything. We just react rather than to think. Someone said to be or not to be is to think or not to think. I believe that there are many ways. One is that when you ignore your past, in other words, you become non-thinking and you ignore your past and what your past does to you in terms of its distortion of your present reality. Because all of our pasts we need to understand in order to be able to know what it is and what prejudices we're putting things through. I'll never forget, I had a person working with me one time in Los Angeles. Her name was Linda. And I remember Linda came in and asked me one day, she said, Mike, are you always up? And I said, well, no, I'm not always up. I see things that really get me down a lot. And she said, but you always seem to be up. I just want to know, how do you do it? What makes you up? And I told Linda a story. I was born in a small town in Greenville, Ohio. My grandfather was a grocer, and so was my father. And I lived next door to a beautiful man by the name of Adam Earhart. He's a German man, and he was in his 80s. As a matter of fact, I thought he was God. I used to, when I'd be out wandering around in his garden, and Adam would be coming along, I'd look up and see this white hair. I thought that was God as a little 2-, 3-, 4-year-old boy, which may not be too bad. But Adam, every morning when I would go to school and to kindergarten, did something that I never found out till a long time later. One day I had gone over to his house to show him some things that I had done. And what I'd done is I used to take my mother's shoe boxes. I'd love to get her empty shoe boxes. I was about 4 or 5 years old. And I would take these shoe boxes, and then when my mother wasn't looking, I'd find her spools of thread and take all the thread off and stuff the thread down in her shoes. And then what I would do is take the spools of thread and usually what I would do is take pipe cleaners, and I would string these spools of thread into people. And then I would put these people inside of these shoe boxes and fantasize about them, make up stories about them. I called them my shoebox people. I still remember the conversations that went on between these spools of thread about what they thought about life and so forth. Well, Adam Earhart wanted to see my shoebox people because he cared, what it was that I was doing. Well, one night I was ready to go to bed, and I heard a knock at our back door. And I remember coming to the top of the stairs in our home there in Greenville, Ohio, and hearing my mother talking to Adam Earhart. And please understand what I'm saying to you. I don't mean to sound ostentatious at all, but just to make a point. And also, I think it's better when you're personal. But Adam Earhart was saying to my mother, whose name was Virginia, he said, Mike, I think is going to always be creative and dreaming up things about what ought to go in boxes. And he was telling my mother about the shoebox people. And I told Linda, I said, as a little boy, what I heard from the top of the stairs, Adam talking to my mother, and Adam telling my mother I was going to be creative, is what I thought all through my early childhood and early life. And see, I said, that's what I heard at the top of the stairs. I'll tell you also what happened. I didn't know it. My kindergarten teacher called my mother and said, what was the matter with Mike? And my mother didn't understand what he means. He said, well, he comes to kindergarten, he goes to sleep all the time. Well, what we found out was that this wonderful German family, Adam Earhart and Seal, as they lived next door, made dandelion wine, about 100 proof. And every morning on the way to kindergarten, I would go by and he'd give me a water glass full of dandelion wine. That's why I love kindergarten so much. I went through it drunk. I said, Linda, you see, the thing is, that's what I heard from the top of the stairs. I said, what did you hear from the top of the stairs? Because I didn't want her to ignore her past, which would cloud her thinking in the present. And she said to me, she said, Mike, I heard the opposite. You know what my mother and dad said? My mother and dad said, Linda has always been frail. Linda's always been sickly. Linda is tall and gawky. Linda is always got a sensitive stomach, and she's always going to be a pain in the neck. You see, and she had that problem all of her life, because that's what she heard at the top of the stairs, which was distorting her current reality tremendously. One time I was in La Jolla, California, doing a weekend seminar, and a very famous man, and I can't tell you his name, but you'd all know his name, very famous man. I was quite honored, really, that he came to this seminar. I had told the same story that I just told you, that how important I felt it was to think and not to be a non-thinker. And this man came, and we were standing out at the Beach and Tennis Club, standing out looking at the sun going down, when this man came up to me, and he put his arm around me, and he was crying. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, well, that story you just told about Linda and about the shoebox and what you heard at the top of the stairs. He said, Mike, I heard the opposite of the top of the stairs where I lived in a beautiful big house. Do you know what my father did to me? One night after we'd had dinner, my father put me up on a mantle and stood out in front of me. I was about 6, 7 years old, and said, jump. And I remember I jumped, and when I jumped, what happened was my father stepped back and I fell on the hearth, and I remember seeing the blood and looking up at my father, And my father made the statement to me. He said, you know, I want you to understand something, son. You can't trust anybody in this world, starting with your own father. I believe it was the first time that man had ever shared that with anybody. But you see, it had altered his thinking tremendously. You can't dismiss your prejudices. They're important. They're important not to ignore. I remember another really magnificent thing that Bucky Fuller said to me. He said that one of the things that you have to do in order to remember where you came from is to ride on your hobby horse. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I still have my hobby horse that I had when I was a child. And he said, so what I do now as a man, I get on my hobby horse because now I'm real big. And I get in and I ride the hobby horse. Everybody thinks I'm crazy. But I can remember, you see, when I was a little boy, how different it seemed. And when I remember riding my hobby horse as I was a little boy, now that I'm a man, it helps me to keep my perspective clear. And it helps me not to ignore my past so that I can do thinking today, which is understanding and looking at things the way they are rather than the way that we would want them to be. Because you see, the second major thing that makes us non-thinkers, probably more, is wishful thinking. And wishful thinking, I wish it could be through some kind of bromides or whatever we do, becomes a substitute for thinking. One time I was speaking in a prison. One of the men that was in there for multiple murders, I had a chance to talk with him in solitary confinement. It wasn't a pleasant experience. And one of the things that he said to me was that he was a Messiah. That's wishful thinking. Because, you see, the reality of behavior was that he was not a Messiah, but that he was a murderer. But he had completely distorted. Wishful thinking, we drop bromides in on the top of facing reality. You hear them. People say, everything's going to work out. What you need to be is positive. Do you know that that particular attitude kills more people every year, probably than any other disease known to man? Because what that says, that wishful thinking, is, I don't have what it is that I have. I can deny the reality. I don't feel the symptom. It'll go away, and so forth. People die because of it. Or how about this one? A turnaround is coming. What you have to do is stay affirmative. I don't know what's wrong with you. You got to really hang in there. Hit them again, because things are going to be different. And now what we found out in reading all the new books and studying what's happening in the world, all the markets changed. The world markets have changed. Everything has changed, and it didn't turn around. It didn't come back the way it was. And so another bromide becomes a great substitute and makes us have wishful thinking. Or how about this? See, that you don't take a strong enough stand. I hear that all the time. If you really believe in something and really believe in it, then we'll win. The problem is you don't really believe in it. And then another thing we hang on people is a religious trip. See, if you had enough religious belief, that for sure would get you through it. And we need to tell ourselves over and over and over and over again that this is the way it's going to be. But you see, what we're really doing is not telling it like it is and not really looking at reality. So the two major areas of non-thinking are that we ignore our past, that we do wishful thinking instead of true thinking. And then another one that I think that keeps us from doing clear thinking is when we're critical instead of analytical. When we're critical instead of analytical, what we do is we just criticize people's behavior, tell them how dumb and how stupid they are, put dogma on top of them rather than being analytical. It's the opposite of critical. Analytical is getting at the cause behind the effect of what it is that's causing them the problem. See, then we can teach them, we can help them, we can develop them. You know why more people won't be analytical? Because it requires thinking. That interrupts racquetball, and you can't do that. So if you think of all of the example, some people, I'm not saying you, but there are some people, for example, that think that you can manage a business in a minute. There are some people talk about you can manage business in a minute, or 3 minutes, or 5 minutes. Same people, I think, have sex in a minute also. You know you can't manage something. Management is one of the greatest arts in the world. Lee Iacocca did not turn Chrysler around in a minute, or in 5 minutes, or in 5 hours. You see, what Lee Iacocca did was to love Chrysler back. And he let the people in his organization help him do it. And he didn't do it because he understood that management was a great art. He understood also, but a lot of people don't understand raising children. A lot of people say, I give my children quality time because I can't give them quantity time. That means they know nothing about children, because every parent's listening to me know it takes quantity time, and every real leader knows too that management takes a lot of time, a lot of quantity time, that you can't hit somebody on the back. You can't just say, hey, you did a great job, or kick them in the rear and say, oh, this is the quick thing that we want to do. That's not the way it's done. A quick goal, a quick pat, a quick kick. You know, as somebody reviewed it, some magazine said, this concept of how to lead and to manage people, well, sometimes it'll work on rats and dogs and pigeons, but not always. One of the things that we know as you starting to think, they're what I like to call 4 levels of ability, 4 levels of things that affect our ability. And let me tell you what the 4 are. And you start really with the bottom that relate to these levels of ability. First, the thing that affects our behavior more than anything else is ignorance. Then we move up to the second, and that's awareness. Then the third is we seek knowledge. And then the fourth is that we have wisdom. Probably the thing that affects our capacity to accomplish in the non-thinking realm more than anything else is ignorance, or it is that thinking people are stupid and putting people down. See, I don't believe that. I don't believe there are very many stupid people in the world. I think that there are a lot of people who have not had the opportunity. That's why I don't think you should ever talk down to people. I don't think you should condescend to people. I don't think you should modify your language. I don't think you should correct something that you're saying. If the word is sesquipedalian, you say it to a child and explain to them what it means, or a truck driver or a banker that doesn't understand what you're saying. See, because there are people that are ignorant but not stupid. You see, it's based on the idea that what we do is determine what we are is determine what we think is determined, of course, what we believe is determined what we're exposed to, and what we do with that exposure. You see, some people are not exposed to very much, so not very much happens to them. Some people are exposed a lot, but they hold back. They won't get into it. They won't have some fun with it. And so it is true that we have ignorance about what makes things happen. I was talking not long ago to a convention in Las Vegas, and I remember hearing Art Buchwald was talking about the fact that he'd gone to the White House for dinner. And I can't imagine Art Buchwald, I love his humor, with Ronald Reagan having dinner. But he said he went to the White House for dinner, first time he's been there in a long time. He only goes if they have a full set of dishes. And the Reagans, the only people who had a full set of dishes for a long time. As Art said, what happened is Richard Nixon, when he was in the White House, and what happened with Carter, and what happened with Johnson. Johnson broke almost all the dishes in the White House. Richard Nixon stole the few dishes that were left, and Jimmy Carter didn't use dishes. You see, one of the things that we have to know is that when we become aware sometimes of our own ignorance by what we're exposed to, that's the greatest thing in the world. We move to level number 2 when we face the areas that we need to grow in. And the only way that we do that is that we become sensitive. When we start becoming sensitive, it's then you start feeling again, and it's then that you know what you can do about something. So first we must move from ignorance to awareness. And then when we start becoming aware, we begin to want knowledge. We begin to want to be able to learn and to be able to grow, because people like to improve their learning skills. It's one of the greatest movements on right now, almost worldwide. It's a great thirst and quest for knowledge. It's part of the revolution explosion, is also causing us a knowledge explosion within people, the desire to know more so that they can have more fulfillment. After you have knowledge, you then move to the 4th level, which of course is wisdom. It's wisdom that the Oriental has, of course, focused on so much, and why they are so good to old people, why they take such good care of old people. And it is one of the things, many of you remember John Belushi. John Belushi, I guess, was not a very good role model. But John Belushi, used to have a statement that he would make, and that was, he would say to everybody, it was sort of his slogan, wise up. He said to everybody to wise up. And I remember the night that he died, Dan Rather paid tribute to him and showed autograph and the statement that John Belushi always said, wise up. And then Dan Rather looked at the camera and made the comment, and he never did. And you see, that's what we now know today, that we must start thinking. And as we start thinking, we've got to wise up. You see, life is too long not to do it right. If you count the number of seconds between birth and death, it's too long not to do it right. Freddie Prinze couldn't go another second. And you see, when somebody can't go another second, it's because they can't think any more ahead to any options that will give them any reason to live. So one of the things, probably more than any other thing, is to avoid at all possible costs those things that cause non-thinking, one of the greatest effectors of ability that there are. We know you can't learn anything from experiences that we're not having. I'd like to recommend some resources book to you in relationship to thinking. Don't forget now, a lot of people sometimes say to me, Mike, I can't find these books that you talk about. Don't forget there are libraries. You need to look down. Have you got a library card? People, I don't know how, they've all of a sudden discovered that no libraries are around anywhere. Get a library card. However, this is a fairly new book. It's written by Alan Harrison and Robert Bramson, and it's called Styles of Thinking. And it talks about that there are about 5 major styles of thinking: the synthesis, the idealist, the pragmatist, the analyst, the realist. And then one of the things that's real fascinating, I was looking back here at the end of this book, take a look at it when you get it, and then there's a test that you can do to find out where it is you are, and really in the back, one of the most interesting charts on these 5 different types of thinkers and their characteristics and what their strengths and their liabilities are. I'll give an example of synthesis, idealist, pragmatist, analyst, and realist. I guess I would have to say I'm an idealist. Well, my characteristic is that an idealist generally has a holistic view. They look for the ideal solutions. They are interested in values, and you hear what I've been talking about, don't you? But they are receptive to new ideas and data. Their strengths are they focus on relationships. They point out values. They're good at articulating their goals. They're best in unstructured environments. And they usually have good broad range views. Now their weakness or their liabilities are they screen out the hard data. I do that. And they delay from too many choices. They try for the ideal solutions, and they overlook details. This chart then, you can find out where you are on here, and it's really excellent. Styles of thinking. Well, this first element, our ability, our capacity to accomplish. It's awesome, isn't it? Man's ability to get things done. Really, it's really quite extraordinary when you stop thinking about it. The only thing that matches our tremendous ability to do things is the awfulness of what happens when people don't get things done. When people don't get things done, that's the only thing that matches when we do get things done. Ability, this great capacity to achieve and to do things, of course, is mankind's most precious resource. Without that, what is it? It's all worthless, because we know it's ability that can overcome a major disaster. It's ability that can reverse a downward trend. It's ability that restores peace, amid chaos. It's ability that turns failures into successes. When you have ability, capacity to do, you're rich. Unlock it.